Hey friends, Jeff here with a new episode of Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. I'm excited today to welcome to the show Ciara Kennedy. Ciara is the founder and CEO of Sorriso Pharmaceuticals, where they are advancing disease-modifying antibodies for the treatment of immune-related diseases, and specifically their lead candidate is being developed to treat inflammatory bowel disease. And as you'll hear in this conversation, Ciara is passionate about what she's doing with her team, and there's clarity in the mission that they have set out to achieve. Who Ciara is to me is that word clarity and also that word mission. Over the course of her career, she has developed the clarity of where she wants and is willing to deploy her energy, her time, and her resources. And when she finds those places, as she has done here with Sorriso, in my estimation, she is unstoppable. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Ciara Kennedy. Ciara Kennedy, I'm so excited for this conversation and just hearty welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm really excited to be here. I know it took a little while for us to get this scheduled, so I'm glad we can finally have this conversation.
Absolutely. I just did a brief introduction of you and who you are to me. Why don't you start us off and let us know what you're up to in the world right now?
Absolutely. What I am up to is a lot of different things. I'm CEO of a company called Sorriso, which is a small, privately funded biotech company that is really looking to leverage and solve the puzzle of how to deliver the tremendous therapeutic value of biologic therapies, multimodal biological therapies, to patients without all of the needles and injections and broad systemic exposure. So what we are doing is taking two validated targets for inflammatory bowel disease and really generating what we view as the next iteration, the next generation of potent, safe, effective products for patients with inflammatory bowel disease, which can be a very debilitating disease, and delivering these orally. So a patient can just take a tablet in the morning and not have to worry about scheduling infusions, doing injections at home, exposing their whole body to a therapy, an immunosuppressive therapy, and really just targeting that power to the tissue of their intestinal tract, where the disease is, where the inflammation is.
And interesting, what we were just talking about before we hit record is what I get about you is you don't step into things lightly.
I don't.
And so my curiosity immediately goes to the deeper story of why Sorriso in founding it, because you left your previous role, you were on boards and advising, and then being a CEO is no small task. It has some, media glamour to it, but this is a big challenge. So why Sorriso? Why now at this stage of your career?
I think I'd take it back a little bit further, and even beyond why Sorriso, why biotech, why CEO. It's obviously one facet of my life. I'm very fortunate to have a wonderfully supportive husband and two beautiful children, and life is multifaceted. But I think for me, when I thought about, you'd asked me the question in preparation for this, what do I love? Which is a tough question, right? So I really thought about what are some common threads throughout life. And it took me back to childhood. And I like puzzles. So I like to solve puzzles. I've always loved jigsaw puzzles. And I'm struck by the skills and approach to solving a puzzle and how I'm using those in life today, every day. And that can be very different depending on the puzzle, depending on the situation. But it's what's the objective? What's the goal? What do I know? What do I not know? Like what are the hidden pieces? My son actually got me an amazing puzzle for Christmas where you don't actually know what the picture looks like until you're done. So you don't have a full map, you don't have a guide, and you got to come up with a plan and execute on it. And I think that applies to biotech. It's applied to my career throughout. I was CEO of Amplex that I sold to Pfizer in 2021. And this opportunity of Sorriso came about actually sooner than I would have liked. I really had planned to take a little bit of time, and that's something, it's not a strength of mine. It's something I'm working on and working towards. But this opportunity came about for this technology that had really demonstrated for the first time the ability to deliver biologics to the GI tract and have them retain activity and survive, right? So our intestines are designed to chew up proteins, and biologic therapies are proteins. So those two things have been inherently incompatible, despite lots of different smart ways to try and overcome that problem. The way Sorriso, actually, and the legacy company that we acquired the technology from, did it was they applied engineering. So they engineered out the places where proteolytic enzymes will cleave proteins so that more of this drug will make it through the system. And that was really compelling for me. I think that in my whole career, I've wanted to get closer to patients. As a scientist, understanding, looking at biology, you're in the system that applies to a patient, but you're not really up close and personal with patients. As I moved into industry, I got one step closer, working at Biogenetic and really getting to meet some patients whose lives have been transformed by our products, and that is. Talk about inspirational. That makes you motivated to get your work done on that day. And then to my first small biotech experience, a company called Lumina, where we were developing drugs for rare pediatric liver diseases. And these are patient populations that have never had any clinical research conducted. We were the first to do clinical trials in multiple different diseases, and that's no easy task with no roadmap, no outline to follow the puzzle. You're really figuring out how the pieces fit together, where the missing pieces are, and we learned a lot of missing pieces after we had finished the study. That would have been really helpful to know beforehand, but we didn't have that information. And that connection to the patients, and that's become my sort of compass, if you like, as I think about what companies I want to become actively involved with, either as an operator or as a board member or an advisor. The picture of what this technology or this approach can deliver to patients has to be clear for me, and it has to be very meaningful. I'm not the right fit for a fourth in class, fifth in class type of a product. Not that there's not a place for them, not that they don't bring competitive tension to the marketplace, which ultimately can help patients. For me, it's answering questions that have never been answered before. That's the really important piece of it for me. And that sort of puzzle philosophy and mentality applies to life, to raising children, to helping our kids become productive members of society. But it's sort of a theme that, as I was thinking about this conversation, kind of popped out to me. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's so much there.
I know. Sorry, I just went on.
No, it's good. It's good. I am attracted to or drawn to the mystery, even the puzzle your son gave you at Christmas, the mystery of what is the picture. And you just said a second ago that you have a view of the end result of what the picture is for the patient as you are developing your therapy and intervention at Sorriso. I'm wondering, while there is lots of unknowns, I'm wondering what's the mystery in it at this moment that has your attention captured?
Absolutely. And it's a very simple question. So we know that the targets that we are addressing work. That we know, so it's TNF alpha is a cytokine, inflammatory cytokine, has been this sort of cornerstone of advanced therapy for inflammatory bowel disease for 20 years. We know it works when you deliver it systemically, directly to the bloodstream or subcutaneously. That's part of our compound. The other part of our compound is it targets IL-23, which is another inflammatory cytokine, also already proven to work in inflammatory disease, including inflammatory bowel disease. Plus, there's the question of when you put the two of these things together, does it give you added benefit without added risk? And that's always that question, that delicate balance that we face is, can we push the efficacy without increasing any safety risk? Yeah. And so we know from studies that have been done that delivering an anti-TNF and an anti-IL-23 has actually hugely increased the efficacy potential. There's still some questions about safety, and both of that has been from the systemic delivery perspective. Now, inflammatory bowel disease is a bowel disease. It's inflammation in the lining and the epithelium of the intestines, either the small intestine or the large intestine. And the question that we are asking is, can we come at it literally from the other side of the tissue? So can we address the inflammation locally by giving these products orally and letting our products get into the tissue, do its anti-inflammatory work, let that tissue heal and recover, and address it that way? And the benefits of this approach are there are two main benefits. We may be able to get a lot more drug to the tissue than you can by delivering it systemically, in which case you might expect better efficacy. But most importantly, we're not exposing all of the rest of the body to these immunosuppressive therapies. So could there be a safety advantage? And those are the questions that we will answer, hopefully, through our development program. One of the biggest safety issues with the anti-TNFs, for example, is you're suppressing the immune system. The immune system has a really important role in fighting infection. So by suppressing the immune system, you're putting patients at risk of what are called opportunistic infections. That could be tuberculosis, that could be CMV, it could be a variety of other things that these patients are at higher risk of when they're on a systemic immunosuppressive therapy. So our key question, just to boil it down, is can we achieve the efficacy locally that has been seen with systemic therapies? And is there a safety advantage?
Yeah. And I have to imagine, and it's inherent what I'm about, there's no magic in my observation, but as it is with doing a literal puzzle, you got to get comfortable with slow progress and even failure.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I'm wondering your journey in your relationship with failure. I mean, you've been doing science for a long time in a lot of different places. And I'm wondering if you were to describe your relationship, if failure was a person, so to speak, if you were to describe your journey around in your relationship with failure, how would you describe that?
That's an interesting question. I think failure is that ever-present, somewhat ominous person standing in the corner, right? The risk that they're there, there's always a risk that they're going to show up. So you have to respect the potential for failure, particularly in our industry. I mean, I think so many people don't understand, who are outside of the industry, don't understand what the real failure rates are. I talk to my family, my parents-in-law, and I talk about, of every product that goes into the clinic, only 1 out of 10 is going to make it to the market at best. Sometimes we improve the odds a little bit here and there, depending on how novel the technology might be. But failure is inherently a part of our industry. And I think that failure is probably the wrong word. And I think it's really information. So data. How do we interpret the data? What assumptions did we make going in? Did we A, do the right experiment, and B, do it in the right way? And if we can say yes to A and B, then it's not necessarily a failure. Yeah. Sure, it didn't go the way we wanted it to go. We would have expected and hoped and planned for something different, but it's not. I think failure is such an emotionally loaded word that ultimately it comes down to what did we learn from that, and maybe what we learned. And I've been in the last 18 months, I have been involved with companies that have essentially wound down that you would, from the outside look, well, the company failed, it wound down, right? So is it a case, in one case, it was really learning that the endpoints that we're looking for in the hearing loss space are just not sensitive enough to show change. Or you could look at it that the therapy, the pathway that we were pursuing didn't have a big enough effect size to move these endpoints in a way that was robustly separatable from a placebo response. Another, we ran into some safety issues. Was shutting down that company, was stopping that trial and shutting down that company a failure, or was it the right thing to do because we learned about the profile of the drug? Yeah. And I think it was absolutely the right thing to do. Taking patients off drug, not putting patients at risk, returning money to investors so they can find a new opportunity to invest in. That's ultimately the right course and should be viewed as a successful outcome, just not by the traditional definition of success.
Yeah, it's almost the way you shifted the way we think about it. From you first described failure as this ominous character in the corner, and then when you gave us that word, it's information, it's data. I even felt myself relax a little bit.
Great.
Like it almost becomes a friend then. It's no longer an ominous enemy or nemesis in the corner. It's a friend who's in the light, to be of value. It's just such an interesting shift.
Yeah. I mean, this industry it's risky, and we take risks alongside our patients and our healthy volunteers in phase 1 and our investors and the regulators. We're all taking calculated risks together. And the opportunity is, are we placing our bets in the right place? And that comes back to that, what's your internal threshold for the projects that you select to move forward, the companies that you want to get involved with, the teams that you build. And each one of those has the potential to de-risk parts of what you're doing, but there's no risk-free biotech.
Yeah. And you're not in a vacuum. I mean, you're not a company of one. You have a team. You have junior people. You have probably folks that this is their first job, and you have people who've been doing this for decades. And I'm wondering the mindset that has evolved for you, who you've become over time. I'm wondering how you have found your way in enrolling people in, not that they have to be your clone, but at least have some of these core principles around failure or information, shifting it that way, seeing it as a puzzle. How have you found your way in coaching or mentoring or enrolling your team in some of these core principles that guide you?
Yeah, I think that a lot of that comes back to that starting point of who are we and what are we doing? Why are we here? Like, what's the end vision of the puzzle? And really connecting individuals to their piece in getting there. And that's always been a philosophy of mine way back. And even before I even realized it was a philosophy of mine, I think that I saw early on in larger companies the importance of connecting individual people and the work that they're doing to the bigger picture. And I remember I used to go to, we had a gene therapy program a long time ago for colorectal cancer with liver metastases. And I would go to the manufacturers who were actually local in San Diego when I lived in San Diego, and give them an update on the program and tell them about the patients that were receiving this drug. Because they're even further removed from the patients than we are within the company. But what they're doing is critical to us being able to attempt to help our patients. So always connecting that dot, drawing a line from each individual, the work they're doing to that objective and that goal. So, I like smaller biotech companies. It's where I've had such amazing experiences over the past dozen or so years. We can't do everything, but there are certain things that we can do really, really well. And I think for me personally, and for the people that I have recruited into Sorriso, many of whom have been with me through multiple companies at this point. So there's a core team that have been through multiple organizations. So we know each other, we respect each other, we know how to work together very effectively, very efficiently. And we bring in new people into that culture of what's the right thing to do. Let's evaluate the situation, get all our information, make a decision, and move on and get to the next question. Because there's always a next question, there's always a next problem, there's always a next thing to solve. But staying connected to that big picture of why we're doing what we're doing, I have found to be the most compelling.
Yeah.
I don't even think it's a tool. It's a philosophy of how we want to show up in this world and how we want to contribute to the mission of what we're doing. A mission sounds kind of religious in some ways, but it's really, we have a goal to evaluate whether our products can make patients' lives better, and that's very clear. And everybody's connected to that, and they know how their piece contributes to that.
Would you take us into a recent conversation with somebody who is new to you, to your world, that isn't a long-standing colleague from another company?
Sure.
Would you just take us into, a recent conversation where you enrolled them in the mission, connected those dots with that person? Again, saving names, redacting
Sure.
that.
I know.
But I'd love to hear an example of that.
So I think that there's a couple of examples of that. We have a newly minted PhD student who actually had some industry experience before going to do her PhD. So she was not new to industry, but she was new to Sorriso, and she joined us this summer. And she is a smart, vivacious young woman, and is really, just from day one, wanted to jump in and contribute and have an impact. And I think that what small companies can do is open up for her all the world of opportunities and exposure. She has her job to do, and she has her work to do in the lab, but she was so keen to contribute. It's okay, join the clinical calls, and you'll see where the data that you're generating in the lab leads to decisions on how we describe the product in the investigator's brochure, and how we structure a lab manual to collect samples in a clinical trial. And she's seeing all those pieces come together, and has got huge exposure to every piece along the chain between starting with a drug, an idea in the lab, to dosing a patient in the clinic, and understanding how these elements weave together to become a stronger story of what we're doing. So, I'll sit with anybody in our company. We're small, right? So we're 12 people, a lot of experienced people. But anybody at any time can call me and just talk about what we're doing, the financing environment, the FDA, their career path, how I think about growing the company. It's a very open door, or open Zoom, because I'm not in the same place as most of them, or actually all of them. But it's really creating a culture of curiosity and openness to conversation and exposure and experience, because the more that she can understand where the data she generates goes and who sees it, and the investigators are seeing it, and the regulators are seeing it, and this is how we talk about it, and this is how we present it to the board of directors. And having junior people get exposure to the board is pretty unusual, but I think it really helps with that. This is my role in the puzzle, and this is how my piece is connected to this piece, which is connected to that piece. And that is how we move our programs forward through the clinic, how we finance the company and continue to do what we do, how we generate excitement about the programs and the potential. So all of those pieces, I think that's a good example of probably not just one conversation, but a whole series of conversations with her to really make sure that she's understanding her role, and her every role in our organization is critical. Everybody is doing a job and creating value that is fundamental to what we're doing. And I believe they all understand that and see that and feel that.
I'm stuck on this word mission. And just there's something so unique about what you're talking about when you say mission. I work with a lot of companies to help them create their mission statement, vision statement, and they're fine. They're good. They're meaningful and true. But there's something unique about your use of the word mission. There's a clarity. There's a clarity. And of course, you have the end picture of what you want the mission or have intended the mission. When you can say mission accomplished, what will that be? But I'll share a personal story of why maybe this is meaningful to me. So I'm climbing in 2025 Mount Kilimanjaro.
Right.
And I'm in a wheelchair, so I can't do this myself. And what has become clear to me is, yes, the hope is that all of us get to the top. But what I've also become aware of is that along the way is going to be transformation of everybody who's involved. And so I'm wondering if you have a sense of, in this journey towards this mission that you have, in serving this patient population, what are your hopes for the transformation of the people who are involved in moving towards that mission?
So when I think about the transformation of the people involved in moving towards that mission, the first image I have is of a child with inflammatory bowel disease. Sorry. Pediatric patients have a very special place in my heart. And I think about the disruption to their lives, the traumatic nature of having a diagnosis and the symptoms associated with these diseases and the impact on their world. It sort of struck me very in a very clear way recently, when we had been involved interacting with patient advocacy groups, and there was discussion about apps for patients that would direct them to the closest accessible, safe bathroom, right? So the urgency with which and the lack of bowel control that these patients sometimes have can completely debilitate and limit their lives and make them not want to leave the house. So for a child to, not want to go to school or not be able to do what other children can do because of their disease is devastating for the child, for the family, for the parents. It really has such a toll. And when I think about, so our product is for adults is a capsule with mini tabs inside. For children, it could be mini tabs. So, like a Pez dispenser, you can get these mini tab dispensers. So when I think about the difference between me as a mother giving my child some yogurt with a couple of Pez dispensers of mini tabs on top, they eat that, they can go have their normal life, versus they're debilitated or they have to go to the hospital to get infusions or get injections, either at the clinic or at home, to access that normality. That's the transformation. And that transformation has such a ripple effect for a child, their family, their friends, their teachers, their whole community. And I think that's the immediate transformation that jumps out to mind for me. I mean, there's a lot of adult patients, obviously, that would benefit as well, but that was the face that kind of rang to my mind when you asked that question. And then there's the transformation that occurs amongst our team when we know that we're doing something really good for patients. And I think back to, I mentioned the company Lumina. We sold that company to Shire, and they continued the development of those assets, but ultimately we ended up working with Ciara to get the assets back and put them into another company that has taken those products to the market, and they're approved. Patients have access to them. I know that the work that we started at Lumina has completely transformed the lives of patients and their families. Again, a pediatric patient setting where the prominent manifestation of disease is unbelievable head to toe itching, where kids will literally tear their skin off. And you can imagine they're not eating, they're not sleeping, they're not doing well at school. There's all sorts of ripple effects from that type of severe symptoms. But that's another patient population that's been transformed. But the transformation I've seen in the people who contributed to that work, the pride and the satisfaction of knowing that I had a hand in that product getting to that place so that patient can access it and have normal childhood, teenage, young adult years, that is beyond powerful. And that personally is the reason why I still have a Facebook account, because I was connected to all the patient advocacy groups at Lumina through Facebook. And I will never let go of that. I'm not active anymore, but I just like to make sure I know patients by name and I want to see how they're doing. And that changes you. I've seen that change people and allow them to then channel that optimism and motivation into, okay, what's the next set of patients that I can help, and the next set of patients. And we talked about risk earlier. It doesn't always work out, but we always learn, and our motivation is always to help and advance the understanding of different diseases and whether our approach has a place. And hopefully it will, but perhaps it won't.
And what I also, a mentor to me who's talking to me about what we're going to do next year, and he goes, Jeff, even if you don't get to the top, every step along the way is a victory.
Yep.
Every step along the way is a victory, because every step or roll of my wheels is a place that I've never been before. And so I would imagine that even in those cases where a company has to close its doors, unfortunately, being the right thing to do, that even getting to the place that they got is an advancement and a victory and transformational for those that were involved.
It is. It is. It's a more painful transformation than the successful outcome. But I don't remember exactly who said it, but the lessons in leadership are you learn more from the missteps and the negative than you sometimes do from the positives. And I do believe that's true. And in terms of your journey to the summit, wherever the summit might be for you, it's the journey. It's the destination's great, but the growth and the development happen along the way, on that path, on that journey. That's where that really solidifies, and you have to push yourself and stretch yourself to get there.
Yeah, we live in a world that's so results oriented, that's so summit oriented. But I think the invitation in this, what we're talking about, is presence. Be in the moment, enjoy the moment, even in the suffering or the challenge. Yeah, and that's hard for us here in the West. But it's such a powerful invitation and a gift that you can give to your people as you lead them into the space.
It is. I heard presence and being described as it's an on-off switch. It's not a dial. You're either present or you're not. There's no 60% present. There's no giving somebody 60% of your attention. It's all, or it really doesn't count for anything. So I think, and it's hard with the flow of information, the speed of things today. It's hard. It's actually part of why we chose to leave San Diego and move to Utah, to slow down life a little bit. And I can definitely tell the difference.
That's so good. Such a great reminder. Ciara, there's so much more, and maybe we'll have a part 2, but the name of the show is Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. And I'm wondering if you could wave a wand over the offices of all your CEO peers around the globe, and they were going to have a conversation over the next week. And whether they're having it already or not having enough of it, we'll leave that for another time to judge. But you get this magic wand, and they're going to have one conversation over the next week. What's that one conversation you want to invite them to have?
There's so many conversations, but the one that I think perhaps is the most overlooked and undervalued is the power of building community. This isn't an easy job, and it's often quite a solitary role, but it doesn't have to be. There are ways for us to build community with other CEOs, to support new CEOs, and those looking to transition into roles of leadership, and to avail of the wisdom of experienced CEOs. Most likely, everything that a CEO is facing has been faced before. And I'm a huge fan of efficiency and not necessarily reinventing the wheel. So I think that looking for ways to become or even create community is such an underutilized asset that we have. That's right here and right available to us. So, I've been so fortunate to become the part of a growing community of biotech CEOs over the past few years, from 24 at our first gathering to now over 250 on our Slack channel. That has become an enormous source of support, friendship, and understanding. I mean, when the SVB banking collapse was happening in real time, like the resources, the ideas, the support that came through this channel were just tremendous. And it's been both professionally and personally rewarding to get to know people in this community in a way that I never have before. And I think it's made what is a solitary job a little less solitary, and a little less unknown in some ways, because again, as I said, so many things, so many CEOs have been through the routine challenges of starting, financing, continuing, transacting, shutting down, whatever stage you're at in your company evolution. There are people who can help and will want to help. People are inherently, I think, just predisposed to helping people. I've seen that in my career. I'm very aware and conscious of being that for other people. And I think that, community technology is great, but it can disrupt community. So building community where we can, I think, is one idea I would love people to give more attention to.
I love that invitation. Here as we wrap, Ciara, what else would you love to highlight about Sorriso and for us to know?
It's a very important year for Sorriso. So we took our dual acting product into the clinic in October. And we are looking forward to, by the end of the year, having some early phase 1b data from UC patients, which will really help us understand how best to develop this product. Is it really going to offer patients what we believe it will? So, our website is sorrisopharma.com. And people are welcome to check it out. I'm on LinkedIn if anybody wants to reach out. Always happy to chat with folks about biotech, about IBD, about Sorriso in particular, about leadership in general. We hopefully we can regroup in a year or so, and I can share some of the updates and news.
That's great. We'll put all that in the show notes. Ciara, this is an unexpected plan, but what came from our conversation was unexpected and in such a great way. So thank you so much for bringing your heart to the episode.
You are welcome, and best of luck on your journey. I know a few people who've done Kilimanjaro, but not in a wheelchair. So it's impressive, and I'll be tracking your progress.
Thanks so much.